pushing yourself to the limits is what I absolutely love on these expeditions. Most things today have been explored. You've got to do something different. Going to the poles of inaccessibility is, for us, a really obvious set of expeditions that nobody's ever done before.
These poles of inaccessibility really allow us to escape the everyday and to connect with the environment and nature around us.
It's not a tourist route, and for us, that's the essence of adventure and expeditions. In 2016, we flew paramotors across Australia to the Red Pole. In 2017, we cycled across South America to the Green Pole. Our latest expedition is to North America, called the Bad Pole. My name is Ross Turner.
My name's Hugo Turner, and I'm one half, but the better half of the Turner twins. An expedition is about reaching the center point, but also it's about the journey, and all these expeditions span across all the world's continents, so we're going to get a huge picture of what the world is like.
A pole of inaccessibility is defined as the furthest inland point you can get on each continent. Nobody really knows what's there. There's no documented photos, videos, and for us that's a really curious and interesting thing.
I think we both saw it as a bit of a ticking the box exercise. We're in a developed country, good roads, good infrastructure. So I think we both thought it was going to be quite easy. And I think easy is probably definitely the wrong word to use.
It's a really exciting time at the start of an expedition. So much is unknown. The last year of traveling and logistics have all paid off. Your bike's full of all your kit, you're feeling excited, full of adrenaline, maybe a little nervous, and you're just trying to keep your mind as open as possible, not to give yourself any mental blocks or constraints. Starting in LA, starting at Santa Monica Pier was really exciting. It's where life thrives. Lots of fumes, lots of traffic, lots of smells, lots of up and down. But LA was huge. That was the biggest thing we took from our trip. It was nearly 90 kilometers across before we got to San Bernardino on our first campsite. By the end of the first day, we got to a small campsite where we could clearly see the Cahoon Pass that went up onto the Mojave Desert.
Obviously, cycling across America has its inherent dangers, and one is cycling on the interstates. You're not legally allowed to cycle on the interstates. You had to stay off those main highways and stick to the more scenic route, should we say.
Probably one of the biggest learning curves we've learnt is to be as flexible as possible. We plan all our expeditions with weather, logistics all in mind, so it's as easy for us to achieve a successful expedition.
The problem with deciding when to do this trip is that the project spanned across all types of environments. So we had desert, we had mountains, and we had grasslands, and that produces their own weather systems. A couple of weeks before we left for the Bad Pole expedition, we flew into LA and saw that the desert temperatures were in the 50s, which isn't ideal for cycling or any sport for that matter.
On this particular occasion, and on this day, the heat was 53 degrees in the desert, which wasn't forecast.
The weather was so hot out there. I think they've had one of the driest summers in history, so hence why they've had a lot of wildfires recently.
We had to change our plan, and that was to cycle first thing in the morning and last thing at night.
Obviously we have a plan A, which is from A to B, but plan B had to be implemented, so we actually picked up a support vehicle midway through the desert section.
Luckily enough, we came to a little place called Needles, which provided us with our first river and an amazing cooling off experience.
Obviously going through these testing times, it does put your friendship to the test, and yeah, we did argue quite a bit at the start. The pressures of modern exploration started to get to us both. I think, we've got one hand, we need to capture and tell our story, and on the other hand, we've got to be true to ourselves and what's realistic, and that was the crunch point.
When you get out the other side, it's a real sense of achievement. Work, home, life is all behind you, and you really start getting into the rhythm of an expedition that we now know and understand so well.
What I love about an expedition is that you feel far more alive on these trips because you tap into your primal instinct. Your body becomes much more attuned with survival and making sure that you get from one day to another.
The one thing cycling allows you to do is to really appreciate the size of an environment, but also the changes in it. You'll go from desert to river to trees within an entire day, and you physically see the tree line starting on that continent.
One specific memory for me, which is my take home, which I think I'll remember for the rest of my life, when we reached Peach Springs, which was just at the start of the savannah. We went through this little gully. We opened up into this beautiful savannah area which had farms and it had cowboys hustling cattle, and it was the first time that it was a nice environment to cycle in. You know, we could find shelter if we wanted it. Literally within the space of 2 hours, my whole mind and perception of what America had been, which was desert, had completely changed.
The tree line going from Williams to the Grand Canyon was very, very straight, and we were expecting to see the Grand Canyon from miles away, but it wasn't until we got quite literally to the road that ran parallel to the edge of it that we realized the Grand Canyon was right there. It was amazing, literally stumbling and cycling right up to it. It's so vast that you can cycle 20 miles to the left or the right and the view's exactly the same. If you're on a beach or an ocean view, things change very quickly. If you go 100 meters left or right, the view is very different. The one part of this trip I was really looking forward to was Monument Valley. Growing up as kids, watching westerns, it's very iconic. And so when we eventually started seeing the huge monoliths and the sculptures and the rock formations, it was really exciting, a little surreal to be honest. And for me, it was the highlight of our trip. We camped right in the heart of Monument Valley. We put our tent up, we lit the fire, and we just slept straight on the ground because it was that hot. Looking up at the sky and seeing all the stars, we had a storm to the right of us. Just seeing everything all in one moment was truly special. Because Monument Valley, Mojave Desert and the Grand Canyon were all behind us, we thought we'd finished the hard slog through the heat. But to our surprise, we saw what we thought was a sunrise in the morning, a really nice orange glow all the way across the horizon. And as the day drew on, it got more orange and much bigger and closer. And then suddenly I saw this valley disappear as this sandstorm started rushing towards us. And it was a real spine-tingling moment. We're in the middle of nowhere. There is no real shelter. And trying to cycle in 40, 50 mile an hour winds with sand being blasted at you for a couple of hours, it left the right-hand side of my body quite red and sore. You never expect there to be a very clean line in nature. When you're cycling over a desert and then you quite literally come to a line in the sand where grass then begins to grow. Pretty special. Heading up into the Rockies was always going to be one of the biggest challenges of our expedition. We were getting towards the halfway stage, a little anxious, the bodies were getting tired, you could notice the weight loss, but the first road up the Rocky Mountains was 90 kilometers of beautiful valley roads, really smooth.
It was breathtaking, but you are also expecting a bear to just walk out in front of you across the road. That does play on your mind quite a bit.
We went through a pass at about 10,500 feet, so not too high, but enough that we could physically feel it when we're cycling. And then we had a beautiful downhill. Looking at the Rockies in all their glory, you could start to see the first snows on the mountaintops. And then we got to Telluride, where we decided to have a day off, relax, and just enjoy a beautiful little ski village the other side of the mountains. It's quite a weird feeling knowing a few days ago you're in the middle of a desert that was so hostile to human life, and now you're somewhere where life thrives.
Cycling through the Rockies in September, the aspen trees change colour in the most dramatic fashion, and we were there in the 1 week that it was at its prime.
The Rockies, as soon as it started, seemed to finish. We got to our last high point where the continental divide is between the Pacific and the Atlantic, and from there we knew it was roughly downhill all the way to Denver. And there it was, just popped straight out. You could see the skyscrapers right between the valley, and from there we knew it was fairly flat, and it was Route 1 to the pole of inaccessibility. Cycling into Denver was exciting, but that excitement soon wore off pretty quickly as we hit the traffic. We started having to cycle on the pavements. It was a bit depressing, to be honest, so we were very happy when we got out the other side and we started hitting the classic huge cornfields of Nebraska. The Forrest Gump-esque roads where nothing for hundreds of miles around you. You've got a slight tailwind maybe, hopefully, and you're doing 35, 40 kilometers an hour for 5-6 hours. After 3 or 4 days of really good cycling, we eventually started kind of getting very close to the pole of inaccessibility. And it's a little surreal when you arrive at these places because you know roughly where it is, but you never know what to expect. When we got there and we turned off a gravel track, we realized this tiny little blue pin on Google Earth was actually a 50-meter high huge water bowser. And that was really weird. That was our first surprise, but it was a great little marker. When we got to near the water bowser, that's when the road stopped and we knew we had to go on foot. When we realized that we were very close to the pole, you do get a little overexcited. The month cycling across the continent is coming to fruition and it's now within touching distance. We met a local who actually lived very close to the pole, but he was the only house for miles around. And the first thing he said to us was, watch out for the rattlesnakes and bison. We prepared ourselves, we got water, we made our panniers into a makeshift rucksack each. We took 3 litres of water and then we headed out across this field with a makeshift rattlesnake detector, which was actually our tripod upside down. The one surprise from being in the very centre of the US was the amount of rubbish that we found actually as we started to walk. We found speakers, bags of clothes, and an old bicycle that actually worked. It's amazing, even in the very heart of these continents, there are still human impacts. We walked along this beautiful ridgeline, probably the most beautiful of all the poles of inaccessibility that we've been to. We stopped on this little chalk top, we had some water, looked at our map, roughly worked out where we needed to go, and then headed off down a hill, and instantly went wrong.
Pretty rookie. You know, the beauty of these trips is you do learn a lot about yourself and how to react in stressful situations. And we gave ourselves enough time in the day to allow for corrections and allow for changes in the plan.
And at that point, you do start questioning yourself. You get white line fever, and that's exactly what happened. We started walking quicker, we started drinking a lot more water.
And we knew that the pole was marked by twin trees. So we just needed to find a couple of ferns that almost V'd in the middle as they hit the ground, and we knew that that would be the mark.
And then through one of the trees, we saw 2 trees, and then we realized we'd made it, which was unbelievably surreal after a month of cycling.
Yeah!
It's a weird feeling getting to your finish line. Half of you is crying, half of you is excited, and the first thing we do is obviously celebrate, enjoy it, and then take a picture.
Yes! We got it! Yes! Oh, the twins have never looked so good. We've cycled, I don't know, 1,600 miles across the States in 25 days to get to a couple of trees. How insignificant! I can't believe it. I actually can't believe it.
What's the one bit of advice you would give somebody?
I would say the one bit of advice I'd give somebody on an expedition or adventure is to share it. Always take somebody with you.
My one piece of advice would be to leave footsteps and memories. I think it's very easy to damage the environment and certainly leave rubbish, etc. So make sure you leave the environment you're in the most pristine way possible, which is footsteps and memories.
Our next plans are to obviously visit more poles of inaccessibility.
Yep, more poles of inaccessibility, and I think more world first adventures.
There's going to be good outtakes on this, aren't there?
Another thing that these poles of inaccessibility... How now, brown cow? But now, just answer my question. I know that you should kind of incorporate...
This is all love right now.
Should we try that again?
Yeah. What was I going to say?
What
What was the question? Okay, stop, pause. Yeah, chill, I'm rolling. Don't interrupt the king.